So now what I'm doing is I'm recording, right? Just a normal 4K video that I'm gonna be posting later, but I'm also streaming in a vertical like content box here, so you guys can see a couple of different things. And this is kind of fun because like normally, like you can see, well, you can't really see if you're watching the stream, but if you're watching my video, you can see my legs cut off, but in the stream, you know that it's so narrow that it keeps me in this box, so it's actually like pretty awesome. So now I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna just start my streaming stuff, but let's wheel. And I got a little wet box, so you guys will be able to see what I got cooking up in my wet box here. I got a bunch of just clay ready to be wedged up and thrown. So it's kind of cool. So you guys will be able to see like what I'm doing on the top here, as well as what I got going on the wheel. Stuff in there is getting a little bit too hard, so I'm gonna make sure I give it a little. You gotta water the plants. You gotta water the plants. Look at that. Pretty nice. And I'm going over the top here. I'm gonna cover that up. And so what I'm doing here is I have the plastic covering up like a good portion of the thing. So when I put the lid on, it traps all that moisture in there. Right now I'm just trying to get a lot of this clay I left out for too long, so it's pretty stiff, but I do like throwing with stiff clay, and so that's part of my dealio here is I like the stiff clay. I don't even know. It's what's gonna get you uncentered, right? Like you gotta imagine a lot of people are, when they're pushing their hands, they're pushing it towards the center. That's not how you get something center, believe it or not. You're always pushing past center, through it, you know? And so when I give that car explanation, it's to help you maybe visualize it a little bit better. 2 lanes of traffic, they're coming past each other. That in between is where center is. Check my fist right here. Sorry, it might hit the microphone here for a second. And so since the clay is so stiff, you kind of have to use, you have to use more strength, but where is your strength coming from? It's not coming from your arms, right? We're not all built like bodybuilders, you know? And so how do you generate that strength is you actually use your body, you know? So that's how I normally do it. Take my fist, I'm slowly bringing that out toward my palm here. And we'll get something pretty close. That's within tolerance, right? And then you want to start with making that little hole on the top. Nice. A little bit of water on the inside there. Like that's what's going to help you move that bottom layer of clay pretty easily. Like if you feel like you can't do it, then you just don't have your hands in the right spot, right? I feel like a lot of people, they're like, oh man, I don't have the strength for it. It's not really about the strength. It's all about where your hand positioning's at. And so this is pretty freaking wobbly here, right? If I'm looking at this, but a little bit's okay because our first pole, our llama pole here, we're gonna bring it up into a volcano. And so there we go. Look at that. So that top rim, you can see it just feels so tight on that top rim. And so you want to just make sure you're not lidding up before you release that clay on the top there, right? And so every single pole, you got to imagine it's like, have you ever seen when the people are really into yoga, they look at the 7 stages, right? And you start at the top and go down. We're like the opposite. Like instead of, I don't know how many stages there are, right? But it's that same kind of coiling up to that release of the top, right? So we got a little buckle on this top part, so it's really thin right there. So we got to be a little bit careful there. That wasn't a really great pull. All right, so still the clay's too stiff to manually want to twist down, so we got to help it out a little bit. There we go. And so you can see where it ripped, but now we have that nice sort of twisting happening from that bottom piece. And so this is where, like, when I first saw this, that's why I call these things my trees, you know, because it really reminded me of a tree. This one's pretty loose. Again, you know, it's not ideal to have that top, you know, collapse the way it did, but I've always think that sometimes, you know, you get some really wacky results if you just let it be, right? And so that's part of my pottery voice, right? Is I really like to explore form. You know, I don't want to be making like forms that people have made for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. I'm trying to make my own sort of pottery forms. All right. And sometimes when I'm sick, like I don't really know what I'm saying half the time, which may not be the best for streaming. But anyway, here we go. We got our hands pushing down. And so I like to do this kind of almost like heart compression bumping here. And I'm just splaying that outward to get it as centered as possible before I even start throwing, right? And so here I am, hand on the bottom. Taking my other fingers, I'm just slowly bringing that up. And I'm bringing my knuckle, right up on this bottom edge. Slowly pushing that up towards my fingers. Look at that. I think that looks just great. So that, remember this first pull, that my voice almost cracked there. Pull! This first pull is not really for height. Remember, like we said when that other one that we just finished, this first pull is really just for getting that what is it called? That clay equal. You know, we're even gonna try to get it a little bit even more equal here. And again, very slow. Slow, direct, and focused. There we go. All right, making that little separation. Remember, very nice and slow on this bottom. We got a little bump, and I always say this is the gift from the pot to us, right? Is this little bump. And the clay, it really only wants this bump to go in one direction, and that's up. And so we gotta help it out. We gotta say, okay, buddy, we're gonna help you out. We'll get you as tall as we possibly can. And so we got a little bit of wobble in that middle part, but still, this is pretty good, especially with the hard clay. You don't really have any control over where that spiral gets laid, right? And part of me wants to have the spiral lay nice and tight right in the middle. And so we'll see how we do. Oh, we ripped through there. That's not good. Okay. So here we are. There we go. Look at how that frickin' just winds up. I'm going to be slow when we release off here. Right? Look at that. Okay. So this one's more like the trees that we have been getting, like the image of them, you know, when we haven't been going too thin. So here we are. Look at that. And again, you know what? If I'm looking at this one, I feel like this one's going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. I've always thought these look kind of like petals, like flower petals, right? And so look at how this kind of works on here. Just like little petals on the bottom. I think that looks pretty great there, guys. Get right up underneath. Get all that water out. Okay, that's number 2. So we got one more for you guys. What I've learned is that you got to be really open to things changing when they come to you, right? Like, I think that's really the power of doing things every day, is you start realizing stuff like your iteration process becomes highly compact, right? Like a week becomes like a whole entire, what you would be able to do in like a year is able to be found out in a week just by forcing yourself to like do the thing every day. And so you discover a lot of things, and you also get a lot of failures, and you also find a lot of things that flop and things that work out and things that you've been doing too long, so you got to swap it up, right? And so that's what this sort of streaming thing is for me right now. So that's over the top. So when you're slow though, right? And so you can kind of let that clay do whatever, right? As long as you can catch it. The other day I had like the coolest catch, and it was during a song, like was playing, like the climax of the song happened and I caught it. It was freaking crazy. Like I felt like I was like an alien or something, like a DJ, pottery DJ. We're just opening and pushing our thumb down on that ridge there. There we go, look at that. So this one's pretty close to being perfect center. And so you got to be careful, because sometimes when you get a thing close to perfect center, it's also a death sentence, right? And what do I mean by that is that, you know, you get everything all nice and perfect, and all of a sudden your poles are flowing like gold, right? And you go too close to the sun, like Icarus, right? That's the guy who flew too close to the sun. Yeah, you want to be more like Sisyphus, you know, just pushing up that rock every day. And sometimes it's going to be a struggle, and that's fine. And sometimes it glides, but you still are pushing up that rock no matter what, right? So that's the kind of mentality that I like to bring to the clay here. So we're reaching our hand in the volcano. Burns a little bit, right? And so the thing is you just don't want to make channels. As soon as you start making channels for your fingers to fall back into, that's when you have to really follow the clay, right? It's gonna like want you to go back in that channel for your next pole. And so you don't really want that. You want the opposite. You want to kind of keep it numb until you get to the height, and then you can really show the breadth of your pole. Man, the clay is always so stiff at the top, man. I just don't. But I was letting my clay dry because I got what I call peanut butter clay, is when the clay just feels like freaking creamy peanut butter. And I was like, well, I'll let it out for a little bit. And 1 8-hour sleep later, shit, you know, I left it all out. Hey, chill. So we gotta slow down our wheel a little bit here. So we're getting a little bit too thin. So we just want to barely touch that rim there. Look at that. Okay. And so we don't want to mess around with that top too much because it got too thin. But, you know, maybe it'll be something cool for us later on. Is that already 40 minutes? No way. No shot. Well, we got a whole new thing. Yeah. Here we go. Hands right up underneath. Deep breath. Nice. I gotta go get something to eat after this. Okay, so what do I mean by long flap over? It's gonna be like this. We emphasize these little flaps, right? Always emphasize it. Little curls. And I really like the way it kind of folds back in, right? I think that looks really cool on some of these pots. And then I'll just do the outro twice. I'm finding all sorts of the funny little things that kind of mess up my video here. Dang, I'm giant right now. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. All the best. Whatever. We tried.